The moment I heard the sirens, I knew the cops were closing in. Vince's men froze, then turned fast, guns drawn, fury blazing in their eyes. In that split second, I realized what I'd done. I'd brought hell to their doorstep. That night, I was supposed to stand with them, but I couldn't let them execute an innocent woman just to save themselves. When the shots started, I ran toward Isabella, not away, praying that she'd live through the storm I'd unleashed. My name is Leo Martin. I live in Chicago, and I raise my son by myself. His name is Ethan. He is 8. Emily, my wife, died a little over a year ago. Since then, the apartment has felt too large for the two of us, and every small noise echoes like a question I cannot answer. The bills came like winter. Hospital notices, funeral invoices, rent that doesn't wait for grief. I work at a small auto shop on West 26th Street. I change brakes, replace mufflers, and take pride in doing the job right. It was honest work, but it stopped paying the nights we needed to sleep easy. Money that used to cover groceries no longer did. I tried extra shifts, favors, odd jobs. None of it closed the gap. A few weeks after Emily's funeral, Vince Romano walked back into my life. We grew up on the same block. In high school, he was the kid who always found a way out of trouble. As an adult, he wore clean suits and drove a black Cadillac Escalade. He said he had a job for me. One job, quick cash, no blood. He said the people he worked for paid well and asked only that I follow directions. I knew the kind of people Vince meant. I knew the rules about gratitude in their world. You take the money, you become a name on a ledger. But the ledger was full of numbers, and so was my fridge, empty. I thought of Ethan's lunchbox, his homework left open at the kitchen table, the way he turned Emily's picture in his hands before bed. I told myself I was doing it for him. The first months with Vince were not like the movies. There were no loud introductions, no dramatic speeches. I drove, I watched, I kept to the shadow. For more than a year now, I have been doing errands and small jobs for the people Vince calls family. It's not a proud statement, just the fact. You learn quickly what questions to avoid, which streets to take, and that silence can be as valuable as cash. Some nights I still sit by Ethan's bed after he falls asleep and listen to the trains rattle past. I whisper promises I'm not sure I can keep. I tell myself I'll stop after this next job, after the next payout. I tell myself I am doing the worst so he can have the best. That's how it started and how it has stayed. The promises, the hiding, the small kindnesses I give in the dark to keep a life that looks normal from the outside. I don't like what I became. I like what I have to be for Ethan, and that is the truth that keeps me doing it. A year inside this world doesn't sound like much until you live it. It changes how you walk, how you look at people, even how you breathe. You start measuring your words, your reactions, the time it takes to notice a tail in your mirror. I've done enough jobs for Vince's people to know what happens to men who think they can walk away. They don't. The work isn't loud. It's waiting in a car all night in some industrial lot off Cicero Avenue, watching a warehouse door that never opens. It's collecting money from a man who swears he doesn't have it, then standing still while your partner breaks his windshield to remind him that lying costs extra. It's delivering sealed envelopes to restaurants where everyone stops talking when you enter. I kept my head down, did what I was told, and went home to Ethan like I'd just worked another late shift at the shop. He never asked why I smelled like cigarette smoke when I quit years ago, or why my hands sometimes shook when I poured him milk. Kids believe what they need to believe. I told him things were getting better. I almost made myself believe it too. Vince said the next job would be clean, no muscle, no risk, just a pickup. But when he slid the folder across the diner table that night, I saw it wasn't a delivery. It was surveillance. A name, a photo, an address in Lake Forest, north of the city. A woman and her little girl. Who is she? I asked. She's the widow of a man who owed, Vince said, stirring his coffee. Guy died before he paid. Now his estate pays instead. We're not hurting her, just finding out what's there to take. I looked at the picture. The woman, mid-30s maybe, dark hair, tailored coat. Behind her, a girl with a backpack turning to laugh at something off camera. They looked like anyone, like what I'd lost. She lives in a big house, Vince continued. The boss wants to know what security she's got, who comes and goes, what's inside. You can handle that, right? I nodded. My mouth said yes before my heart could object. It was easier to agree than to argue. Easier to keep pretending this was just another job. That night, I drove home through light snow. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on. I turned it down and sat beside him, watching the blue flicker move across his face. In the picture on the folder, the little girl had the same sleepy smile. I knew then this wasn't going to be as clean as Vince promised. I started watching her the next morning. Her name was Isabella Reed, 36, CEO of a marketing firm that had her last name on the glass door downtown. Her late husband, Thomas Reed, had borrowed money from the wrong people and died before he could pay it back. The debt didn't vanish when he did. I drove a gray Chevrolet Malibu. Nothing fancy, nothing that drew attention. Most days I parked across from her Lake Forest house behind a row of trimmed hedges. The place was big but not flashy, a long driveway lined with oak trees, the kind of house built for people who used to smile more than they do now. For the first few days, I took notes. Times, faces, license plates. She left at 8:10 every morning in a black Mercedes S-Class, her daughter in the back seat. The girl's name was Sophie. I heard it when Isabella called to her near the car. Same age as Ethan. Same small backpack with keychains. I told myself it was just another job, but it wasn't. Every time I saw that kid wave through the window, my stomach tightened. I'd stand there with the camera, pretending to adjust the lens, but all I saw was Ethan at that age, waiting for his mom to come home from the hospital. By the third week, I started knowing too much. What she liked for coffee, 2 sugars, oat milk. What radio station she played, soft jazz in the mornings, talk radio on the way home. She worked late, came home tired, sometimes carrying files, sometimes groceries. Never with anyone else. Always alone. One evening, she stopped by a park near the lake with Sophie. I stayed in my car, engine off, watching them feed ducks as the sun fell behind the water. Isabella laughed, a quiet, real laugh, and I hadn't realized until then how long it had been since I'd heard a sound like that. When they got back to the car, I was parked close enough to hear their voices through the open window. Sophie asked, "Mom, can Grandma pick me up tomorrow?" Isabella smiled and said, "Yes, honey. You'll stay with Grandma and Grandpa tomorrow night. Mommy has an early interview, a very important one." Then she added softly, "I'll be back before breakfast." Something in the way she said it made the air feel heavier. Not fear, not hesitation, just a kind of quiet acceptance. Like she knew tomorrow might not bring what she promised. I don't know why, but my chest tightened. Maybe because I'd said the same words once, to Ethan, on the day Emily went in for her last treatment. "I'll be back before breakfast." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen staring at the folder with her photo. The job was almost ready to move. Vince wanted a report by morning. I wrote down everything. Her schedule, her car, the alarm system, the gate code I'd seen a contractor punch in. Then I closed the notebook, pushed it away, and whispered to myself, "She's just another name. Leo? That's all." But I already knew that was a lie. The night before the job, I couldn't sit still. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you. It presses on your chest until you remember what you're about to do. I walked from room to room in our small apartment, trying to keep my mind anywhere but there. Ethan was in his bed, half asleep with his stuffed bear tucked under his arm. The lamp on his nightstand still glowed. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him breathe. His hair was the same dark brown as Emily's. His mouth shaped the same way when he dreamed. I thought about how many times I had told myself this work was temporary. A few months to get us on our feet. A few jobs until the debt disappeared. But debts never disappear in this business. They grow teeth and follow you home. Downstairs, my phone buzzed. "Vince." I knew what it would say before I looked. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Lake Forest. Interview cover confirmed." He'd been planning it for weeks, setting up a fake business interview with Isabella Reed at her home office. The team would arrive as journalists. The lights and cameras would be real, but the story wouldn't be. Once inside, they'd disable the security, grab whatever documents, codes, or valuables they could find, and be gone in minutes. Vince said she wouldn't even realize it was a setup until it was too late. I was supposed to drive one of the vans, keep communication steady, and make sure no one from the neighborhood got suspicious. Easy money, he called it. But I couldn't shake the sound of Isabella's voice when she told her daughter she'd be back before breakfast. I kept hearing that line again and again until it tangled with Emily's last words to me. "You'll take care of him, won't you?" Around midnight, I went into the kitchen. The table was covered with unpaid bills, the same ones that had led me down this road. I opened the fridge, half a carton of milk, some leftovers, and a note from Ethan taped to the door. In his messy handwriting, "Love you, Dad." It should have made me smile. It didn't. It hurt. I sat down and stared at my phone for a long time. I could text Vince, say I was sick, say the car broke down, say anything. But lies only bought a few hours in that world. You missed one job, they'd replace you before noon and come looking after dark. So I put the phone down, finished a cold cup of coffee, and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, do what you have to do. Then get out." But deep inside, I already knew I wasn't getting out. Not tomorrow. Not like this. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just sat by the window, watching the headlights move across the ceiling, wondering how a man who once fixed cars for a living ended up planning a robbery against a woman who reminded him of his wife. Morning came too early. I watched the city change colors through the kitchen window, gray to pale gold, like the sky was pretending it didn't know what was about to happen. Ethan ate cereal across from me, swinging his legs under the chair. He talked about a school project, something with rockets, and I nodded like I was listening. I wasn't. My mind was already in Lake Forest. After he left for school, I stood for a minute by the door, listening to the echo of his sneakers on the stairs. It hit me that I didn't know if I'd be home in time to pick him up. I grabbed my jacket and left without locking the top bolt. I told myself I'd be back before sunset. We met at a parking lot near the Old Harbor Mall. Two black Cadillac Escalades were already there. Vince leaned against one, smoking. The others, 5 guys, loaded equipment into 2 white vans. Cameras, lighting stands, tripods, even fake press badges. The plan looked clean on paper, almost professional. You'd never guess it was a setup for a heist. Vince clapped me on the shoulder. "You'll drive the first van. You're the tech guy today, Leo. Stay quiet, stay useful." I nodded. No one looked nervous. They'd done this kind of thing before, maybe too many times. To them, it was just another payday. To me, it felt like the start of something I couldn't undo. By 8:30, we were on the highway heading north. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, eyes on the road, heart stuck somewhere between my ribs. Vince sat in the passenger seat, going over the plan again. 10 minutes inside. No drama. She's expecting a team from Modern Business Weekly. We set up the lights, chat a little, then the boss gives the signal. We get what we came for, and we're gone. "What exactly are we taking?" I asked quietly. He looked at me with that half smile I hated. "Documents. Keys. Maybe a few extras. You don't need details. You just drive." We reached the neighborhood just before 9. The streets were clean and silent, lined with trees that looked too perfect to be real. Isabella's house sat at the end of the block. Pale stone, black iron gate, wide driveway. Her Mercedes S-Class was parked outside. Vince checked his watch. Showtime. We rolled up like professionals. The guards at the gate recognized the fake company name from the schedule Isabella's assistant had confirmed. I followed the second van in, heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the rumble of the engine. Inside, everything smelled expensive: fresh flowers, polished wood, coffee. Isabella stood in the doorway of her home office, dressed in a gray suit, her hair pulled back neatly. She smiled politely, the way you smile at strangers you don't intend to remember. "Good morning," she said. "You're from Modern Business Weekly, right?" Vince nodded smoothly. "That's us, ma'am. Thank you for having us." No suspicion, no fear, just a woman doing her best to keep her life moving after loss. As they started setting up lights and cables, I stood by the window pretending to check the wiring. My job was to watch for anyone approaching the house. But all I could watch was her, calm, unaware, sitting at her desk while a storm gathered around her. I thought of Ethan's note on the fridge, "Love you, Dad." I wondered what he'd think of me if he saw where I was now. At first, everything looked normal. The interview began just like Vince promised. Lights on, cameras rolling, smiles rehearsed. I stood near the corner window, the fake tech guy checking cables that didn't connect to anything. My earpiece crackled every few minutes with quiet updates from the others scattered through the house. Isabella sat across from Vince at her desk, hands folded neatly, voice calm. She didn't know that the questions he asked meant nothing, that the real conversation was happening between the men outside her office. Men opening drawers, testing safes, and whispering into radios. I watched her the way I'd learned to watch people in this line of work. Every detail, every flicker of reaction. She spoke about her company, about rebuilding after her husband's death, about how success didn't erase loneliness. There was no arrogance in her voice, just exhaustion covered in elegance. When she smiled, it wasn't for the camera. It was for control, the kind of smile you wear when you're holding a house together with your bare hands. Vince leaned forward slightly. Your late husband, he was in real estate, right? Heavy investments in downtown development. The question wasn't in the script. Her face barely changed, but I saw it. The small pause, the slow inhale. She nodded. Yes, he managed several projects before he passed. Vince smiled back. Tragic thing, debts like that. They don't die with a man, do they? I froze. The room stayed still for 2 seconds that felt like 2 hours. Isabella tilted her head, confused. Excuse me. Vince chuckled, pretending it was a joke, but his eyes had already given away too much. One of the guys by the hallway gave a small signal. Time to start the transfer. I felt my stomach twist. I knew what was about to happen. They'd cut the power to the cameras, pull the blinds, move fast. She wouldn't even have time to scream. I couldn't do it. As Vince adjusted his tie, I stepped forward quietly, close enough for her to hear me, but not them. My voice was low, almost a whisper. Ma'am, I said, you should find a reason to end this interview. Now. She looked up, puzzled. I'm sorry. Something's wrong, I murmured. You need to leave. Take your daughter and go. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in panic, but in recognition. She studied my face for a second too long. Maybe she saw that I wasn't lying. Then she reached for her phone, smooth and professional, and said to Vince, I just need to check something with my assistant. She left the room calmly. No one followed her. They thought she was just making a call. But I saw her hand tremble when she pressed the screen. She wasn't calling an assistant. She was calling for help. I turned back toward Vince, trying to look busy again. My pulse thudded in my ears. That's when I felt it, a presence behind me. One of the guys, Mick, had been standing close enough to hear. His voice dropped low. What the hell did you just tell her? I didn't answer. He stared at me for a moment, then walked out into the hall. I knew what that meant. He was going to tell Vince. And once Vince knew, the whole house would burn. Mick came back less than a minute later, and the look on his face told me I was finished. He wasn't shouting, but his eyes had that sharp, narrow focus men get right before something ugly. Leo, he said softly, Vince wants to talk to you. The other guys were still moving around the office, pretending to film while unplugging hard drives and stuffing papers into folders. But I could feel the shift in the air, tension thick and electric. Vince had stopped talking to the camera. The fake interview was over. He turned toward me with that same cold grin he used when he didn't trust someone. You got something you want to tell me, old friend? I swallowed hard. No, everything's fine. Really, he asked. Because Mick says you've been getting chatty. Says you told our host to step out. The room went quiet. Even the sound of the camera stopped. Vince's men were watching now, pretending to pack up lights, but really waiting for his signal. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. She looked nervous, I said, forcing the lie out slowly. Maybe she figured something was off. I didn't tell her anything. Vince stared at me for a long second, his hand resting near the inside of his jacket. You sure about that? I nodded, though my face felt numb. Then the sound broke the tension, a faint siren, distant but growing louder. Not close enough to be a coincidence. Everyone froze. Vince's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. What did you do? He hissed. I shook my head. Nothing. I didn't. Don't lie to me, he snapped. He grabbed my collar and slammed me against the wall, his voice low but shaking with rage. You brought them here, didn't you? You think you can play hero now? You think this woman's worth your life? Behind him, Mick pulled his gun. 2 others followed. The barrels glinted in the soft studio lights, pointed right at me. For a second, no one moved. The sirens outside grew louder, echoing through the open front gate. Vince looked around, desperate for control. Everybody listen. We hold until I say otherwise. We finish what we came for. But it was already too late. The rhythm of the sirens changed, that short, pulsing pattern that means someone's on your street. Cops, one of the guys muttered, peering through the curtain. They're here. Vince turned back to me, fury and disbelief in his voice. You sold us out. I didn't, I said quietly. But I'm not letting you hurt her. That was when he swung the gun toward me. The first real panic hit me then. Not fear for myself, but for Ethan, for the promise I'd made to Emily, for the life I was seconds away from wasting. The rest happened fast. Someone shouted. Someone else pulled the plug from a light. Glass shattered. The front door burst open with the crash of boots and shouting. And then came the gunfire. The first shot cracked through the room like a whip. For a second, I didn't even know who fired it. The sound was everywhere at once. One of Vince's men dropped the camera, and the lens exploded across the floor. Then everything turned to chaos. "Down!" someone shouted. I think it was a cop. But nobody listened. Vince's guys scrambled for cover, guns out, shouting orders that didn't make sense. Papers flew. Lights crashed. The whole fake studio dissolved into panic. Vince still had his gun pointed at me, but he hesitated when he saw the red and blue lights flashing through the blinds. "You think they're here to save you, Leo?" he yelled over the noise. "They're gonna bury you with us." I didn't answer. I moved on instinct. Isabella had come back into the hallway, frozen near the stairs, her phone clutched in both hands. I could see the terror on her face. She hadn't expected any of this. She'd probably just wanted to protect her daughter. I ran toward her as another shot went off. Wood splintered near the doorframe. She screamed, and I grabbed her by the arm, pulling her behind the wall. "Stay down," I shouted. "Don't move." She looked at me, eyes wide, realization cutting through the fear. "It was you," she whispered. "You warned me." "Doesn't matter now," I said. "Get your daughter in." Before I could finish, the front windows blew inward. The SWAT team stormed in, black uniforms, rifles up, voices sharp and synchronized. "Police, drop your weapons." The men around Vince fired back. Bullets tore through furniture and walls. The smell of gunpowder burned the air. I pushed Isabella lower, shielding her with my body as pieces of plaster rained down. Vince shouted something, maybe an order, maybe a curse, and bolted toward the back hallway. He fired once more, wild, hitting nothing but glass. Mick tried to follow him, but the cops were faster. One clean shot dropped him to the ground. It was over in seconds, but it felt endless. When the noise finally died, the air was filled with static, radios, heavy breathing, boots moving cautiously across the floor. I realized I was bleeding. A line of heat cut across my shoulder where something had grazed me. My head rang. But I stayed between Isabella and the door until I heard the word clear. 2 officers moved in, shouting for everyone to show their hands. I did. Isabella did too. They cuffed me anyway. I didn't fight it. As they led me outside, I saw her daughter, Sophie, standing with a policewoman near the gate, wrapped in a blanket, crying but safe. Isabella broke down when she saw her. I turned my face away. I didn't want her to see what I'd become. The flashing lights made the whole street glow red and blue. My hands were behind my back, my shoulder burned, and I knew what was waiting for me. A cell, a trial, maybe worse. Still, as they pushed me into the squad car, one thought cut through the noise: Ethan. I'd promised him I'd come home. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. They kept me in a holding cell downtown for 2 days. No clock, no window, just the hum of the vent and the sound of boots in the hallway. Every time a door opened, I thought it would be Vince walking in, somehow free, somehow ready to finish what the cops hadn't. But it was never him. The third morning, a detective came. Mid-40s, gray suit, coffee breath. He dropped a folder on the table and stared at me like I was already guilty. "Leo Martin," he said. "Auto mechanic, father of one, linked to multiple surveillance jobs tied to Romano's crew. You want to tell me how a guy like you ends up in a house full of armed men pretending to be journalists?" I didn't answer right away. I stared at the metal table, tracing the dents with my fingertip. "I was working off a debt," I said finally. "I didn't know they were going to hurt her." He snorted. "You didn't know? You were on their payroll for over a year." "Yeah," I said quietly. "And every day I hated it." He studied me for a moment longer, then leaned back. "Funny thing, the homeowner, Isabella Reed, she told us you tried to warn her. That's the only reason she called us when she did." I looked up at him. "She said that?" He nodded. "Said you risked your neck to protect her and her kid. You're still in deep, but that statement might save you from drowning." He left me there with that thought. I wasn't sure if it was mercy or another trick, but it was something I hadn't felt in a long time. A chance. A week later, they transferred me to Cook County Jail. It wasn't violent, just cold and colorless. Men who'd run out of excuses stared through me like I was a mirror. I didn't talk much. I ate. I slept. I counted the hours. Every night, I thought about Ethan. He was with a neighbor now, Mrs. Donnelly, an old woman from our building who used to bring him cookies after school. I prayed she kept doing that. I prayed he didn't ask too many questions. One afternoon, the guard called my name. Martin, you got a visitor. I expected a lawyer, maybe Vince's people trying to clean up loose ends. But when they led me into the small visiting room, I froze. Isabella was standing on the other side of the glass. No makeup, no business suit, just a gray sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked tired but steady. And next to her, holding her hand, was Ethan, my son. For a second, I couldn't move. I picked up the phone slowly, hands shaking. Ethan, I whispered. You okay, buddy? He nodded, eyes red. Mommy's scarf still smells like her, he said softly. Mrs. Reed brought it. I looked at Isabella, confused. She lifted her own phone. I spoke with your lawyer, she said through the glass. I told him you saved my life, Leo. The district attorney agreed to review your case. I stared at her, not trusting my voice. Why are you doing this? She hesitated. Because you didn't have to help me, but you did. You could have looked away. You didn't. For the first time since that night, something inside me eased. The guard tapped the window, signaling time was up. Isabella smiled faintly, then looked down at Ethan. He's strong, she said. He gets that from you. They turned to leave, and for a moment, I caught their reflection together in the glass. The woman I almost destroyed and the boy I still had a chance to save. When the door closed behind them, I sat there, hands trembling, and realized I wasn't thinking about survival anymore. I was thinking about redemption. 2 weeks later, my public defender came with news I didn't believe at first. The DA had reviewed Isabella's statement, along with the police reports. She had gone out of her way to tell them I tried to stop the robbery before it happened, that I shielded her when the shooting started. She told them I wasn't one of them. It wasn't a miracle, but it was close. The armed robbery charges were dropped. What remained were lesser counts: association, obstruction, accessory. Enough to keep me for months, maybe a year, but not forever. The detective who once called me a liar now shook my hand and said, You got lucky, Martin. Don't waste it. Luck. I didn't believe in luck. I believed in choices that haunt you. When the judge finally signed the release order, it was a gray Tuesday morning in March. They handed me my old wallet, my watch, and the same jacket I'd been wearing that day in Lake Forest. The fabric still smelled faintly of smoke. I walked out through the gates of Cook County Jail, the cold wind cutting through me like a warning and a promise at the same time. Isabella was waiting by the curb. She was leaning against her car, a silver Porsche Panamera, clean and quiet, the kind of car that didn't belong near places like this. When she saw me, she smiled, small but real. I stopped a few steps away, unsure what to say. You didn't have to come, I said finally. I know, she replied. But I wanted to. We stood there for a moment while traffic passed. Finally, she added, Ethan wanted to see you. He's with Sophie at my place. I told him you'd be out today. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She opened the passenger door. Come on, she said. You've had enough of buses and concrete. The drive was quiet. Chicago looked different after a year behind bars. Louder, brighter, alive. Every face on the street looked like a second chance. At her house, Sophie ran to her mother the second she stepped out. Ethan stood beside her, shy but smiling. I dropped to one knee and hugged him. His arms wrapped around my neck like he was afraid I'd disappear again. You're home, he whispered. Yeah, buddy, I said. I'm home. Isabella watched us with that same quiet calm she'd had the first time I saw her. When Ethan ran inside with Sophie, she turned to me. They've become friends, she said softly. It's strange how life works, isn't it? I nodded. Strange, yeah? Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it heals. She looked at me for a moment, her expression gentle but unreadable. Leo, whatever happens next, you don't owe me anything. I just didn't want your story to end in a cell. I wanted to tell her that she'd done more than free me. She'd reminded me what decency looked like after I'd almost forgotten. But the words didn't come out right. Instead, I said, thank you for believing me when no one else did. She smiled again. Then make it count. And I intended to. Freedom doesn't feel like a door swinging open. It feels like silence you don't know how to fill. That first week out, I woke up every morning before sunrise, waiting for the guards to yell my name, waiting for the routine that no longer existed. The city sounded too alive: car horns, dogs barking, kids running on the sidewalks. For a while, I didn't know what to do with that much sound. Ethan slept in his own bed again, but sometimes I'd catch him checking the doorway before closing his eyes, as if to make sure I was real. I'd sit beside him until he drifted off, then stare at the ceiling, thinking about all the nights he went to sleep without me. The guilt sat in my chest like a second heartbeat. I found honest work again. A friend from the old auto shop gave me a chance. It wasn't much, just brake jobs and oil changes in a small garage near Cicero Avenue. But it paid enough for rent and groceries. The first day back, I caught myself staring at a customer's Cadillac Escalade, and my hands shook before I realized why. I still saw that black SUV in my nightmares. The smell of gunpowder, the flash of light, the moment everything collapsed. At night, I'd sometimes drive past Lake Forest, parking a few blocks from Isabella's house. I never told her, but seeing the lights on there, seeing that she and Sophie were safe, made something in me settle. I wasn't spying this time. I was reminding myself that not everything I touched had to break. One Friday, she called. I was wiping grease off my hands when I saw her name on the screen. "Leo," she said, "I know it's short notice, but Sophie's school is having a fundraiser tomorrow. Ethan's invited too. Maybe you both could come." For a moment, I just stood there, unsure how to answer. Part of me wanted to say no, that I wasn't ready, that people would stare. But another part of me, the one that had been quiet for too long, whispered yes. The next afternoon, I drove Ethan out there. The event was small: music, food stands, kids running around with balloons. When Isabella saw us, she smiled, and something about that smile didn't feel like pity anymore. It felt like a door quietly opening. We spent the afternoon watching the kids play. She told me about rebuilding her company, how she'd turned her husband's old debts into something that actually helped small businesses. I told her about the shop, about trying to be better than the man I used to be. For the first time in a long while, I laughed. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that feels like breathing again after being underwater. When the sun began to set, she looked at me and said softly, "You're not the same man who walked into my house that morning." I nodded. "No, I'm the man who almost lost everything because he forgot what mattered." She didn't argue. She just smiled and said, "Then maybe that's exactly the kind of man worth knowing." And for the first time since Emily died, I believed her. Months passed quietly. No sirens, no late-night calls, no envelopes slid across diner tables. Just the rhythm of ordinary life, school mornings, workdays, weekends that actually felt like weekends. For the first time in years, peace wasn't something I imagined. It was something I lived in, even if it still felt fragile. Ethan was thriving. He'd grown taller, more talkative. Sometimes I caught him humming while doing homework, the same tune Emily used to sing in the kitchen. He still asked about her, but now the questions came without tears. "Do you think Mom would like Isabella?" he asked once. I thought for a long moment before answering. "Yeah," I said softly. "She would. She'd like that someone was looking out for us when I couldn't." Isabella had become part of our lives in a way that didn't need explanation. She'd invite us for dinner sometimes. Nothing formal, just take out on her back porch while the kids played in the yard. There was something steady about her presence. No pity, no judgment, just quiet understanding. One evening in late fall, after dinner at her place, the kids went inside to watch a movie. Isabella and I stayed outside. The air smelled like rain, and the last leaves clung to the trees. "You ever think about going somewhere else?" she asked. "Starting fresh?" I smiled faintly. "All the time. But I've learned something about running. You always take yourself with you." She nodded slowly. "That's true." We sat there in silence for a while. The porch light cast a soft glow across the wooden steps, and I realized I hadn't felt this kind of calm since before Emily got sick. Not happiness exactly, more like stillness. A sense that the world had stopped asking me to fight it. When I looked at Isabella, she was already looking at me. "You know," she said, "I never got to thank you properly. Not just for that day, but for everything after." "You don't have to," I said. "You saved me too." The wind moved through the trees, gentle but cold. She reached over and placed her hand over mine. Not dramatic, not forced, just there, warm and real. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The kids' laughter drifted from the living room, faint and distant. For once, that sound didn't break something inside me. It fixed it. When I drove home that night, Ethan fell asleep in the passenger seat, the city lights sliding across his face. I glanced at him and thought about everything we'd lost and everything we still had. Emily was gone. The past couldn't be rewritten. But what remained was this: a boy still smiling in his sleep, a woman who believed I could be better, and a life that hadn't given up on me yet. And for the first time in years, That felt like enough. Winter came early that year. The streets of Chicago were dusted with snow, softening the city that had once felt like a cage. I woke up before dawn most mornings, brewed coffee, and watched the first light touch the rooftops across the street. Peace still felt unfamiliar, but it was something I was learning to live with, like a scar that stops hurting but never disappears. Ethan and I had found our rhythm. He'd get ready for school while I packed his lunch, both of us moving through a quiet routine that didn't need words. Sometimes he'd catch me staring out the window and say, "You're thinking again." I'd laugh and tell him, "That's what old men do." He'd roll his eyes and remind me I wasn't that old. Every Sunday, we'd drive north to Lake Forest. It started as a visit out of gratitude, but it became something else, something steady. Sophie and Ethan were inseparable, and Isabella always greeted us with that calm smile, the one that had started to mean home more than any address ever did. One evening, after dinner, the kids ran off to build a snow fort in the yard. I stayed behind to help Isabella with the dishes. The house was warm, full of small sounds, the clink of plates, the hum of the heater, the muffled laughter outside. "Ethan's changed," she said quietly. "He's lighter now. So are you." I nodded, drying a glass. "Maybe that's what happens when you stop looking backward." She set the last dish down and turned to face me. "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" I thought about that for a long moment. The noise, the danger, the constant pretending. "No," I said finally. "I miss who I was before it." She smiled softly. "Maybe he's still here." Her words stayed with me long after we said goodnight. Later, when I went to check on the kids, they were both asleep on the couch, the movie still playing quietly. I turned off the TV and pulled a blanket over them. For a moment, standing there in the half-light, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace that didn't need to be earned, only accepted. When I stepped outside, the snow had stopped. The world was still. The sky over the lake was pale silver, the air sharp but clean. I thought of Emily, of the promises I broke and the one I finally kept. I wasn't the man she married anymore, but maybe I was finally the man she hoped I'd become. Inside, I heard Isabella's voice calling softly to the kids, her laughter joining theirs. And standing there on that porch, breath turning to mist in the cold air, I realized something simple and certain. Some redemptions don't come with applause. They come quietly, in second chances, in shared laughter, in lives rebuilt from ruin. And that was enough for me.